Our time is right now. This is Carolina Coral in the studio. I welcome the viewers of Freedom. Let's move on to the news. The main targets of last night's Russian strike on Ukraine were thermal power plants and energy facilities. This was reported by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. The aggressor also attacked civilian infrastructure in 10 regions. This is already the third massive attack on energy facilities in October.
Russia continues its terrorist war, and it is important that every such cowardly attack on civilians comes back to Russia with concrete consequences, sanctions, and real pressure. We expect that America, Europe, and the G7 countries will not ignore Moscow's desire to destroy everything. New steps are needed to increase pressure on Russia's oil and gas industry and its finances. Secondary sanctions are also needed against those who sponsor this war. Volodymyr Zelensky, President of Ukraine, on Telegram.
In Zaporizhzhia, 2 people were killed and more than 20 injured as a result of a combined Russian strike. At night, Russian occupiers attacked the city, launching 20 drones and about a dozen missiles at residential neighborhoods. The explosions destroyed a 5-story dormitory and damaged more than 20 apartment buildings and private houses. You can see the consequences of this attack in Oleg Predikin's report.
The Russian attack on Zaporizhzhia began around 1 in the morning. The sleeping city came under drone and missile strikes.
I slept before it even began. At the spa, slept, and then after that they started shooting.
There was thunder in all areas of the city during the attack. Maria was on duty at work. She says there were so many explosions that she lost count.
Quiet arrival.
How many explosions were there? I counted 20. I sit at work all night. I counted 20. I couldn't count any more after that. It started non-stop at around 2:30 and didn't stop until 5 in the morning. It's just impossible. What a racket. I don't know when this will ever end. One of the drones hit a dormitory. The building's facade collapsed, and the floors caved in from the 5th down to the 1st floor. There isn't a single intact window left in the building. The doors in the entryways and on the balconies have been blown out.
Everything was just blown straight through like that. TVs, everything, windows, everything was blown right out. Straight onto the balcony, out of the balcony. It's a nightmare over there. What's happening? Of course, we're in shock. You honestly don't even know what to grab onto because, well, everything's been blown out.
During the rescue operation, emergency workers recovered the bodies of 2 people from under the rubble of the dormitory. The emergency work has been completed. Now they will reinforce the remaining structures to prevent the surviving walls from collapsing. Utility services are restoring electricity and gas lines and removing construction debris.
First of all, we're boarding up broken windows and clearing the rubble.
In total, as a result of the Russian strike on Zaporizhzhia, 23 people were injured, including 6 children. Doctors assess their condition as moderate. Law enforcement has opened a criminal case regarding the Russian war crime. Natalia Husak, Oleg Predikin, and Boris Yakovenko reporting from Zaporizhzhia for Freedom TV channel.
A 7-year-old girl died as a result of the Russian shelling of Latizin in the Vinnytsia region. She was hospitalized in extremely critical condition. Doctors fought for her life, but they couldn't save the child. This was reported by local authorities. 4 more people were injured. 2 of them are in the hospital in moderate condition. In the city itself, heating and water supply are partially unavailable, and both civilian and critical infrastructure, housing, people's property, and vehicles have been damaged. Rescue services are working at the scene. The Russian army attacked a gas station in Sumy with a strike drone. According to preliminary information, 4 people were injured, and buildings and cars were damaged. This was reported by the State Emergency Service. Rescuers are inspecting the area and dismantling damaged structures. In total, last night Russia used 705 aerial weapons for the attack on Ukraine, including more than 50 missiles and over 650 drones. According to the Air Force Command of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Ukrainian air defenders managed to shoot down 623 targets, including Kalibrs, Iskander-KS, as well as Kh-101 and Kh-59 missiles. The attack was repelled by aviation, anti-aircraft missile troops, electronic warfare, and drone units, as well as mobile fire groups of the Ukrainian Defense Forces. Because of the Russian attack, Poland closed civilian airports and once again scrambled military aircraft. This was reported by the Polish Air Navigation Services Agency. Commander-in-Chief Alexander Syrskyi described the situation in Pokrovsk as difficult for the armed forces of Ukraine, but assured that the claims by Russian propagandists about the alleged encirclement of Ukrainian forces there, as well as in Kupiansk, do not correspond to reality. Moreover, Syrskyi noted that the Ukrainian Defense Forces have advanced in the Dobrapilya direction. He arrived in the Pokrovsk-Myrna-Rad agglomeration area. There, Russian troops are increasing their activity. During the trip, Syrskyi met with the commanders of Army Corps, military units, and subdivisions. The commander-in-chief also listened to reports on the current situation on the battlefield and the needs of Ukrainian defenders. 172 combat clashes took place on the front just in the past day. The most intense situation is in the Pokrovsk direction. There, Ukrainian defenders repelled 55 enemy attacks. On each of the neighboring front sectors, Kostantinivka and Oleksandrivka, there were more than 20 clashes. The situation also remains difficult near Kupiansk and Lyman. There were 15 and 17 Russian assaults there, respectively. 960 Russian occupiers were eliminated on the front in the past day. Thus, according to the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Russia's total combat losses since the start of the full-scale war have almost reached 1,140,000 people. In addition, the day before, defense forces destroyed 2 Russian tanks, 3 armored vehicles, 25 artillery systems, as well as a Russian multiple rocket launcher system, and burned 128 units of enemy automotive and special equipment. Partisans from the main Directorate of Ukrainian Intelligence carried out a series of sabotage operations in Russia. They destroyed several cell towers at once, along with communication equipment belonging to local mobile operators. Intelligence officers also noted that in recent months, fires have been recorded, in particular in the Republic of Adygia, Rostov region, Kamchatka Krai, as well as in territories of Ukraine temporarily occupied by Russia. Ukraine has established serial production of 120mm caliber ammunition. These are used by Western tanks, in particular the Abrams and Leopard 2. This was reported by Ukrainian armored vehicle manufacturers. This became possible thanks to the transfer of technology by a Czech manufacturer. In addition, the production of artillery ammunition has also been put on the assembly line. The Czech side also supplies components, in particular powder charges, detonators, and other key elements. This is the 5th visit to Kyiv since the start of the full-scale Russian aggression. The Minister of Foreign Affairs of Slovenia has arrived in the Ukrainian capital. A few days earlier, Tanya Fajon visited Lviv, Khmelnytsky, and Zhytomyr regions. The head of Slovenian diplomacy inspected the implementation of humanitarian projects sponsored by her country and announced that Ljubljana will allocate funds to support more than 100 families in the Sumy region during the heating season. Today, Tanya Fajon held talks with her Ukrainian counterpart, Andriy Sybiha. They discussed military cooperation between the countries, the situation at the front, and the shelling of peaceful Ukrainian cities by the Russian army.
I shared with my colleague a list of specific needs. I shared with my colleague a list of concrete requirements to strengthen Ukraine's resilience and defense ahead of the winter. Continued support from our partners is crucial. Thank you to Slovenia for the military assistance already provided to Ukraine. We greatly appreciate this support and hope it will continue. I would also like to specifically mention Slovenia's joining of the Pearl Initiative. This is true leadership and a model for other NATO partners.
Slovenia, support to Ukraine.
Slovenia remains committed to supporting Ukraine, its territorial integrity and sovereignty, and recognizes its borders. We stand by your side as you defend yourselves against Russian aggression, and we will do so not just in words, but in actions for as long as it takes. We support all diplomatic efforts to achieve peace and an immediate ceasefire. We want to put an end to this war.
The United States is resuming nuclear weapons testing for the first time in 33 years. President Donald Trump sent the corresponding order to the Pentagon just minutes before his meeting with Chinese leader Xi Jinping began. Trump's decision came after China expanded its nuclear arsenals and after Russia announced the testing of a nuclear-powered cruise missile and warhead, as well as a nuclear torpedo. The last time the United States conducted a nuclear test was in 1992.
It seems like all of them are conducting nuclear tests. We have more nuclear weapons than anyone else, and we don't conduct tests. We stopped doing that many years ago. But since others are conducting tests, I think it's appropriate for us to do the same. Donald Trump, President of the United States.
At the same time, the American president noted that nuclear disarmament among countries would be an extraordinary event, and that the United States is already essentially negotiating about this. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban is planning to meet with U.S. President Donald Trump at the White House on November 7th. This was reported by the office of the Hungarian Prime Minister. They noted that the meeting will be a continuation of long-standing negotiations between the countries on issues of economics and finance, energy and defense. The leaders will also discuss a possible meeting between Donald Trump and the Russian dictator, which could help bring an end to the war against Ukraine. Special attention during the talks is expected to be given to Hungary's purchases of Russian energy resources. Let's discuss the next topic in more detail. So, the trade war, Russia's aggression against Ukraine, and possible ways to end it. These were the topics discussed in South Korea by U.S. President Donald Trump and Chinese leader Xi Jinping. This is their first meeting since the start of Trump's second presidential term. They agreed to hold the next meeting in April 2026. After a 2-hour dialogue, the heads of state left without making any statements to the press. However, after the meeting, Donald Trump reduced tariffs on goods from China by 10%. Now the total tariff will be 47%. Trump also noted that he and Xi had agreed on almost everything, including trade, soybeans, and tariffs related to fentanyl. In addition, the head of the White House confirmed that he discussed the war in Ukraine with Xi.
We will work together to see if we can do something. We agree that both sides are stuck in the fight. Sometimes you have to let them fight, but you will help us, and we will work together on Ukraine. There's nothing more we can do.
Ukraine hopes that the meeting between Donald Trump and Xi Jinping in South Korea will help bring about productive peace talks and put an end to Russian aggression. For its part, Kyiv remains in constant contact with its partners in Washington. This was stated today by the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, responding to journalists' questions during a briefing. Andriy Sybiha added that the American side, and I quote, is already very well aware of Ukraine's position on this issue.
President Zelensky, on the eve of this meeting, voiced our expectations, in particular, that the Chinese side would stop purchasing energy resources from Russia, because it is absolutely clear that the sale of energy resources, especially oil, is the main source of funding for the Russian war machine. Undoubtedly, China can play a more active role. Undoubtedly, China has sufficient tools to influence Russia. We still do not have so-called diplomatic feedback from our partners regarding the results of this meeting.
Ukrainian intelligence is monitoring Beijing's position in the context of the war unleashed by Russia. President Volodymyr Zelensky reported this after a conversation with the head of the Foreign Intelligence Service of Ukraine. Ola Ivashchenko informed the president about the mood in China and their immediate plans regarding the Kremlin's actions.
It is important for China to join efforts to stop Russia's ongoing attempts to expand and prolong the war. There will be appropriate instructions for our diplomats based on information from the meetings that took place in the region in recent days. Volodymyr Zelensky, President of Ukraine, on Telegram.
While Putin is launching missiles, real agreements about a new world order are being made without him. Now, it's more profitable for China to trade with America than to support the Kremlin's toxic war. This was stated by Andriy Kovalenko, head of the Center for Countering Disinformation at the National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine. He noted that President Trump and Chinese leader Xi Jinping are signing a trade agreement on rare earth metals and reducing tariffs, while also discussing how to jointly end the war in Ukraine. Russia is no longer needed by either Beijing or Washington. Its only trump cards, cheap resources and war blackmail, disappeared in a single day.
Trump stated directly, "We will work together to end Russia's war against Ukraine." And she called Trump's policy of making America great again in tune with the idea of China's revival. They are not enemies, they are partners. And for Moscow, this is a catastrophe. While Putin is launching missiles, real agreements about the future world order are being made without him. Now China has an incentive to trade with America rather than support the Kremlin's toxic war. If Beijing and Washington find a new formula for cooperation, Russia will simply remain outside the civilized world, forever playing the role of a raw materials appendage, but only situationally. Andriy Kovalenko, head of the Center for Countering Disinformation at the National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine, on Telegram.
Trump was prompted to announce nuclear tests, in particular by Putin's recent statement about the Poseidon underwater drone with a nuclear power unit. The Russian dictator first mentioned it back in 2018. A year later, the Russian Ministry of Defense released a video of the Poseidon tests. 6 years have passed since then. Putin called the recent launch a huge success and assured propagandists that there is no equivalent to the Russian underwater drone. Why did Moscow decide to announce a whole series of weapons tests? Find out in our report.
For the first time, Russia managed to launch a nuclear power unit, which Poseidon operated on for a certain period, Putin told Kremlin propagandists. According to the Russian dictator, this drone is more powerful than the Russian Sarmat missile and, as usual, has no equals and never will. By the way, the dictator once again promised that the heavy silo-based intercontinental ballistic missile RS-28 Sarmat will soon be put on combat duty. He has been making this claim with enviable regularity since 2020.
In June 2023, during a meeting with graduates of military academies, the Sarmat systems will be put on combat duty in the near future. And already in September, the head of Roscosmos, Yuri Borisov, claimed that they were supposedly already on combat duty. In May 2022, at Roscosmos, its former head Rogozin promised that nearly 50 Sarmat systems would soon be put on combat duty. And in April 2021, the Russian dictator told the Federal Assembly that by the end of 2022, an entire regiment armed with Sarmat ballistic missiles would be put on combat duty. From a publication by Defense Express.
According to the Kremlin, the Poseidon tests were conducted just a few days after a test launch of a Burevestnik cruise missile with a nuclear propulsion system from the Novaya Zemlya archipelago in the Barents Sea. The head of Norway's military intelligence service confirms the fact of the launch.
The general public first learned about the development of the intercontinental cruise missile project Burevestnik in 2018 from Putin's address to the Federal Assembly. The American Analytical Center Nuclear Threat Initiative wrote, citing American intelligence data, that from 2017 to 2019, Russia conducted at least 13 tests of the Burevestnik, but only 2 of them were even partially successful. From a publication by Novaya Gazeta Europe.
One launch doesn't mean anything yet. You really need a large number of launches to understand whether it works, whether it's reliable, what this missile is capable of, and so on. So here, of course, you know how it goes. There are a few launch attempts, and then suddenly, one is successful. And then it's like, that's it, everything's fine now, you should be afraid of us. But that's not how it works in the field of nuclear deterrence.
Putin claims that the missile's range is unlimited and its flight path is unpredictable. But when it comes to the fact that the Burevestnik test in August 2019 at the test site in the Arkhangelsk region ended in failure and the death of 7 people, the Russian dictator prefers not to mention it. In addition to the Burevestnik, Russia also announced the launch of Yars and Siniva intercontinental ballistic missiles from the Plisetsk Cosmodrome during nuclear tests. All of this is a show of force meant to disrupt aid to Ukraine, experts are convinced.
The fact is, these scare tactics are nothing more than information operations. The second launch of the Orshnik was unsuccessful, and the Burevestnik only flies in words. Putin is simply using Naryshkin's ideas, which he stole from the days of the Cuban Missile Crisis in May. There is no threat of an attack on NATO, Lavrov's statements about security guarantees from Russia for NATO are part of the Kremlin's information game. So far, Trump and his nuclear submarine are the best counter to this game in the West. Andriy Kovalenko, head of the Center for Countering Disinformation at the National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine, on Telegram.
The Russian weaponry that Putin boasts about does not match the stated specifications, according to experts. The Russian military-industrial complex can't cope without Western components, and import substitution isn't helping.
Usually, in situations like this, a country's fate depends on whether it has any allies who can provide significant support, material, financial, or military. It turned out that Russia doesn't have anyone. China only sells some components and doesn't really make much of an effort to help Russia develop. It doesn't give Russia any credit, and Russia is starting to, well, scrape together its last remaining resources. Apparently, even those aren't enough anymore. In fact, it's been said for quite a while, about a year and a half ago, I think that there are problems in the military industry.
Analysts suggest that this new round of demonstrative saber-rattling is Moscow's response to discussions about possibly supplying Ukraine with American Tomahawk missiles. For years, Moscow has used training launches and tests of nuclear weapon delivery systems to blackmail the West. Victoria Chistiakina for Freedom TV channel.
Subscribe to The Gaze and stay updated on the most important events, top news from Ukraine and all over the world, in-depth analysis, exclusive reports and interviews, all on hand in our channel. Join our community of viewers and stay tuned.